Hey guys, welcome to Bible 365. I'm your host, Kathy Carter, and today I'm bringing you First Corinthians chapter 3. And in this, we're going to be talking about the temple of the Lord. We're going to be talking about what it means to be spiritual and how we plant a church with what we understand to be spiritual. So if you're interested, I want you to stick with me, and I'll see you in a minute. Hey, welcome to Bible 365. I'm your host, Kathy Carter, and this channel is here to kind of merge Bible living with Bible literacy. So we are going to be using the New Testament this year in order to understand what it's like to live as a follower of Christ. I have a link below in the description that I have a download that will bring you to a chronological Bible reading of the New Testament. So what I want you to do is read every day and join me and hopefully some friends as we talk about what it means to live as a kingdom builder. Let's get started. Hey, welcome back, or welcome for the first time if you've never seen any of these videos. I am in First Corinthians chapter 3 today. And so just to give a little teeny tiny bit of historical information about what's going on, Paul is writing to the area in Corinth. Paul had planted this church. So Paul is an apostle of Christ. He was on the road to Damascus when the Lord found him and showed him who he was. And so then he converted, and instead of killing Christians, he then started producing Christians. He started going out and sharing the gospel. And so now we find ourselves, he had built this church in Corinth. So he had gone and he had preached the word to the people in Corinth. He had stayed a while. So if we refer back to Acts 18, he had stayed there for some time. The Lord was like, don't be afraid, stay here. And so he had stayed there for some time, and he was building up the church. And then he left, and then he was built up another church. And in doing so, he heard some stuff, and so wrote a letter to the people. And so at the time that he wrote this letter, he was with this guy Sosthenes. We don't know if he was with more people, but maybe just when he sat and wrote the letter, it was just him and Sosthenes, or maybe he wanted them to make sure that they knew that he wasn't alone, that he was with Sosthenes. There could be any number of reasons why he wanted to make sure that he gave them this name. But at least the two of them were there, and at least the two of them were writing the letter to the church in Corinth. And he wrote to them understanding and believing that they knew the gospel, that they heard the gospel, that they were able to produce the spiritual gifts through the gospel, but they were sinning in the church. Which you might say to yourself, every church sins, but maybe this had hit an egregious point where it needed to be called out. So it's one thing if maybe an individual here or there and they needed to rebuke and people needed to repent and move on. But it seemed like it was serious enough that people were going, hey, there's serious divisions among this church. They're starting to worry about who they're coming from instead of worrying about Christ and following Christ. And so they were supposed to be in agreement about these. I don't know, some of us would call them essentials. Some of us would call it the majors. Some of them would call them the most important of things. And so it seems like the gospel, right? The understanding of how we've been saved through Christ is detrimental. This is extremely important to our faith. And then there are other things that are also important that cause division inside of the church. And we should not be having division inside the church. When there is division inside the church, it is not a healthy church. So whatever side you are, let's just say you're in a part of a division in the church, whatever side you're on in this point of division, you might be like, I'm 100% right. And you might be right, but you are not supposed to be part of a division in church. And so there's a way that we need to go about handling these situations, because we need to be of one mind and one heart and one body. And so divisions are extremely important to handle inside of the church. And whose responsibility is it? Well, that can be a whole different thing. So he's talking to them because he recognizes there's divisions. And in some ways he starts to get, I'm going to say, a little bit insulting to them, because he starts discussing what it's like to be a natural man versus a spiritual man, right? A natural man is someone who does not understand the spiritual things. It is someone who has not been saved, right? Who has not recognized who Jesus was, come to him and follow him, and now understands the truth. That's a natural man. A spiritual man is one who understands the truth, who understands all things. And when you do that, and you're like actively sinning against those things, you're lacking in maturity. Okay, so this is what he's saying. So he's saying, They're lacking in maturity. And then moving on to chapter 3, he says, and I, brethren, couldn't speak to you as the spiritual men. Like, I back then, when I first kind of introduced all these things to you, I couldn't speak to you as spiritual men because you weren't, right? Like, you were unbelievers, you were Gentiles, you were people of the world. And so I couldn't speak to you as spiritual men. I needed to come to you a little bit differently, understanding that you are natural men and just preaching Christ crucified. This is what he did, right? Like, he came in and he was like, I didn't use these crazy weird words. I didn't speak in wisdom of the world. I came to you and I just spoke Christ crucified. He said, but as to men of the flesh and as infants in Christ, this is what they were like. They were brand new babies. And I want to do this visual, but I don't want to spend too much time on it because he says, I gave you milk to drink, not solid food, for you were not yet able to receive it. Indeed, even now you aren't able because you're still fleshly. So the vision is, obviously, we look at a baby. You're an infant in Christ, right? Like, imagine a brand new baby, right, that is born, and you can see that, like, it's helpless in all things. I want to point this back to the idea that we speak to a lot of maybe Presbyterians, but Baptist evangelicals, right? This idea of being born again, which is something that Jesus mentions, right? He mentions that we need to be born again. And Nicodemus is like, huh? I don't understand. How can you be born again? And so this is this idea, like, you were of the world. You were a child of the world, so to speak, right? Like, you lived in the world, you understood the world, you were born in the world. Now you understand who Christ is, and so you have been a reborn human. But because you are a reborn human, you're back to that infantile stage. You're back to, like, you're a baby that can't feed itself on its own, that needs to take a bottle or milk, right, from your mother or from, from a spiritual mother or father, whatever that might be, because you're just a baby. Like, you're new, you can't walk yet, you can't talk yet, you can't form full sentences. Like, this is the image that when we first come to Christ, and I'm going to be like super guilty of this, because when I first came to Christ, and like the first year or two, I was definitely submissive under people and kind of like listening and understanding. And then, like, my life got really, really good. Like, my marriage got better. I was a better parent to my kids, just because, like, I started to understand things more. And I started to understand, like, I started to put my hope in Jesus, and I stopped putting my hope in things of the world, like vacations and cars and houses and money and a good job and my kids being perfect. I stopped putting everything in that, and I started putting everything in what was genuine, which was Christ. But I was still extremely infantile. And yet I thought I was not. Like, I thought, man, good stuff is coming, so I must have it all together. And I started leading groups. And I don't want to take away from somebody that's younger in the faith and starting to lead groups. I get the idea that we need group leaders, but we also need mature Christians to always be among us, because um, we lack a lot of what we need. And then, like, we're teaching each other and we're all infantile. So let's just say you have a whole bunch of teenagers in the room. For anyone who's a parent, right, you have a whole bunch of teenagers in the room, and you walk in the room as a 40 something, which is me, and you're like, what are these dummies talking about? Like, they haven't held a job, they haven't lived on their own, they haven't had to pay bills, they don't even drive a car. So there's something to be said about, when we start teaching each other, we're missing a huge portion of what is true, because we're not mature enough to understand that. So let's just say you're in a group. It's amazing to have a mixed group, and I don't even mean mixed age or mixed gender. What I mean is mixed in the faith, right? Having some brand new Christians in the group, but extremely imperative to have some mature Christians in the group, to be able to not tell everyone how dumb they are, because, again, obviously those are my expressions, but to offer godly wisdom to the ones who are drinking milk, but don't know how to get out of that. Right? There's a point where, like, we don't understand how to get out of it. We hit this top layer, right, where we kind of think we know everything. And then, because we think we know everything, and we don't understand anymore, we don't know how to break through that ceiling of getting out of that area and learning and growing more. So sitting yourself under somebody that is more mature in any stage of your faith, by the way, even if you're 70 and you're like, but I've been a Christian for 50 years, sitting yourself with someone who may have gotten a degree from a university, a biblical type university, would be amazing. Sitting with somebody who's lived a different life than you as a 20, 40, 30 year, 20, 30, 40 year follower of Christ, right? These are the mature things that this is how we show maturity in the faith, not by causing divisions, not by saying one is better than the other, not by sticking with our own kind because we don't want to go out and see what anything else is about because we know all of it. This is an immaturity. And he says here, how do I know that you're not able to understand all this stuff? Because you're still fleshly. And I know you're still fleshly because there's jealousy and strife among you. So when you have divisions in your groups, in your churches, in your small groups, this is fleshly. You are behaving like the world. And I want to make this extremely clear because he doesn't say, he keeps calling, he calls them saints in the beginning. So he's not like, oh, you guys aren't Christians anymore. But this is a huge but. You're fleshly, you're worldly, and there is danger there. Now, I don't know if the danger is that you could fall from the faith, or if the danger is there's gonna be judgment, right? And like you guys think there's not gonna be judgment anymore, and there is still judgment to come. And you're like, yeah, but it's a new heaven and new earth. But we're gonna see. He says he judges you based on your deeds, not on other people's things, right? He bases you on what the ability he gives you. So he says, you guys are still like the flesh. And I know because you keep saying you're of this and of that. And let me explain to you who Paul and Apollos are. Because he says, you say you're of Paul. My dog just came back. You say you're of Paul. You say you're of Apollos. But let me just give you a taste of who they are. In verse 5, he says, what then is Apollos and what is Paul? Servants. Paul and Apollos are servants. And we can look, and especially now, like we go to churches and everyone loves to do the letters of Paul, which I totally understand. They are extraordinary. Like, because I go to a church, right, like a body of believers, this is amazing because it teaches us how to behave as a body of believers, right? So these are kind of like our go-tos a lot of the times. And they're really, really intellectual. They're really smart. They're really well written for us. And so we kind of have to rifle through it a little bit to try and understand what it means. So in some ways, it builds us up because we think that we're a little bit smarter. But he's like, and Apollos, according to everything that was said, which we learned about Apollos, was this amazing speaker, and he was eloquent, and he understood everything in the word, probably rich. So we're looking at these two men who probably are extremely different from each other, but are both extraordinary in their own way. And we're like, ooh, let's lift them up because they're amazing. And he's like, we're just servants. Imagine what a servant is. Imagine you as whatever you are. You're looking at a servant. You're looking like, let's go literal, right? Go to a restaurant and the server, and everyone is like, oh, well, I treat them really well. I say hi to them. I'm nice to them. I tip them really well. They're the ones that are, you're sitting in your chair, you got the money, and you're ordering the food, and they're the ones that are coming and bringing it to you. So there is a hierarchy in this situation that you're the ones sitting, paying, and ordering, and they're the ones that are bringing, right? So you're not going to elevate them to this status like, oh my gosh, they're the most most amazing server, and they're so much better than I am. The reality is you're the one that's sitting at the table. And so these are these like small things that we sometimes forget to recognize in our desire to be like so good and so equitable and so amazing and all those things. Um, but that's what Paul is saying about him and Apollos. Him and Apollos are not here. They're here. They're servants. They are serving the information to the people. The information is coming from the Lord. I should say here. The information is coming from the Lord, and they're just distributing it, right? They're just serving that information. They are significantly lower than the Christ who has saved them, because they say they're servants through whom you believe. So they're servants through Christ, as the Lord gave opportunity to each one. So the Lord is like, you now understand, and I'm going to have you serve here, and I'm going to have you serve there, and I'm going to have you serve here. I'm going to have you serve in this body, and I'm going to have you serve at your workplace, and I'm going to have you serve at your friend group. This is the opportunity that we get through Christ. And he says, I planted, Apollos watered. So my job was to plant. Apollos's job was to water. He says, but God does all the growth. Like God is the one who has done all of the work. And I say that, my dog's playing. I say that because it's a hard line, because we see that Paul and Apollos both did the work, right? Like they both worked. God causes the growth. God is the power through which, right? So Paul plants. God has given Paul the ability to plant. God has given Apollos the ability to water, right? And then he also is the one who grows up the fruit, the vegetable, the whatever it is, right? He's the one who grows the faith. They do the job that the Lord has given to them to do. I hope that it's minutia, right? It seems small, but it's important, because it's important that we recognize that God is the one who gave the gift, but we're the one who has to use the gift. So there's a dual role sort of being done here, because we have to do. He's not making us do. He's just giving us the opportunity to do. He says, so then neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything. Like we're just the servants. But God who causes the growth. Now, he who plants and he who waters are one. So they're similar, right? They're both servants. He said, but each will receive his own reward according to his own labor, which is this thing I was talking about earlier. God knows what you do. So say you guys work together and 100 people are planted because of this. He told Paul to plant. Paul will be rewarded for his planting. He told Apollos to water. Apollos will be rewarded according to his watering. If Paul plants and Apollos doesn't water, Apollos is not going to be rewarded for that. If Paul plants 100 and Apollos only waters 50, right? There's going to be rewards based on that. I gave you the opportunity to do this, and you did or did not do those things. You're going to be rewarded to the opportunity that you were given and that you took. And again, small detail, right? But important. Are you working to your gift? Are you listening, hearing what the Spirit has to say, and are you doing everything the Spirit asks you to do? Paul, we seem to think, especially in some of his ending letters, did everything the Lord told him to do. Still sinned, still got angry, still fought with Mark, right? Still broke with Barnabas. He wasn't perfect, but he did the things that the Lord told him to do. Make sure that you're in that boat, right? Like you're listening and you're doing the things that God is asking, has given you the opportunity to do. And we look at it as an opportunity, and some are like, oh my gosh, but it's so hard. It's so embarrassing saying that. And if somebody asks me, I'm afraid, right? I'm just going to say this, or I'm just going to say that, or I don't want this thing at risk. He's giving you opportunities. And as David said back in his Psalms, it is a joy to follow his statutes, right? It is a joy. It produces, if we go back to Galatians, it produces the fruit of peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control. I know there are others, but this is what it produces when we take the opportunities that God has given to us. He said, for we are God's fellow workers, right? We work alongside, we work with the Lord. You are God's field, God's building. So Apollos and Paul are working to build this building, right? And not a literal building, but the building of creating the body of church. And he's like, you guys are the building right now. We're the workers, right? And we're each given our opportunity. Eventually, I'm going to tell you that I believe that people who have been the building then become the workers. It's not just the 12 or the 13 or the 14, because here we are with Apollos, and right. So some of these extras, it's not this small amount, but we eventually become the workers. So when we get mature in the faith, we're the workers in the field as well. And then we're building, right, this new building. So it says, according to the grace of God, which was given to me like a wise master builder, I, Paul, laid the foundation. And another is building on that foundation. But the foundation, because now we're going to talk about the building and the builders, the foundation must be Christ. The foundation can be nothing other than Christ. And you can't build on it other than Christ, because then we've got a foundation, but we've got no building. We're not building anything properly on it. So we need to come in it with an understanding of the gospel and the truth of how it is. And I don't want to take away from anyone who just received the word of the Lord, was converted, saved, whatever it is you want to call them, and goes right out and shouts out. Paul did that same exact thing. But we need to keep learning. So our building materials, because we're going to see some of the building materials, our building materials get stronger and deeper, right? And more able to withstand this fire that is coming. So he says, no man can lay a foundation other than Christ. Now, if any man builds on the foundation, so Paul has built this foundation of Christ, and then others come in, because he can't do everything, right? He goes to this place, he builds the foundation, he moves on. He's not to stay in that area forever, because that's not his opportunity. He goes, he builds the foundation. So then others come in and they start building on the foundation. And he says, so now if any man builds on the foundation with gold, best case scenario, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each man's work will become evident, for the day's going to come when it's revealed by fire. All of these things are building. So I don't want to say that straw sucks because it's going to get burned away. Straw is probably that initial thing that you start building the second you become saved, right? Or maybe not. Maybe straw is when you think you're a mature builder, but you're a fleshly builder. But it is a building block. Now, some of that building block is going to be burned away because some of it was only hay. So it helps pack in a little bit, like you're thinking like mud, hay, right? Like it helps build on that building, but it's not the strongest of materials. So when a fire comes, things get burned, things melt, and you're really not left with any of that hay anymore. And so some of it gets burned away, but he says, if any man's work is burned up, right? So like if that straw and hay and wood might be burned up, right? And it won't necessarily be, but if it is, it says he, he will receive a reward. If any man's work is burned up, he will suffer loss, but he himself will be saved, yet so as through fire. So the work might be burned up, but it doesn't mean that he's not saved. He's not with the Lord. He's not with Christ. So although his building materials aren't maybe necessarily the best of things, it doesn't mean that he's not saved, right? And that's why I say we need to become more mature as we go along so we can get these better building materials. He says, and then he follows up with this temple of the Lord thing, which I really love because I think it's used, I think at least twice. And I feel like it's misused both times. Whereas like, so I'm in the fitness industry and everyone's like, oh, your body's a temple. So make sure you eat really good food. And I don't think that's at all what it means. So in here, if we relate back to what it means by context, don't you know that you're a temple of God and the Spirit of God dwells in you? So he starts by saying you're building all these things, but you might suffer loss, but you'll still be saved because you're the temple of the Lord, right? Like you, because of your faith in your foundation, because of your love of Christ, you're that strong building, right? You are the temple of the Lord. And he said, the Spirit of God dwells in you. So once the Spirit of God dwells in you and you are the temple of the Lord, you will not suffer harm, even though your work might suffer harm, because that hasn't been built yet. If any man destroys the temple of God, God will destroy him, for the temple of God is holy, and that's what you are. So you, once you have the Spirit, you are holy, and you are set apart from others because of that holiness. And you're able to withstand the fire because you are holy and set apart. He said, let no one deceive himself. And any man among you thinks he is wise in this age, he must become foolish. Do not depend on the wisdom of this age. It changes. It's the same thing I was saying yesterday. It changes all the time. What we think is wise now was not wise then. We have to focus on the wisdom of the Spirit and not the wisdom of the Lord. You must lose the wisdom of the world in order to be able to retain the wisdom of God. If you keep yourself, and this is one of the Jesus things says, if you have a foot in here and a foot in here, right, you cannot balance, right? You're going to fall off of that boat because you cannot be in both worlds. He says you can't have the love of money and the love of the world, or I'm sorry, and the love of the Lord. So you can't balance in these two areas. You need to give up the world in order to gain the Lord. So become a fool. People go, you don't believe in that? You don't believe that's ridiculous. You one of the things that you hear all over Facebook is Sky Daddy. Oh, I'm sorry that you believe in that Sky Daddy. And by the way, that hurts because then you're like, they're telling me I'm an idiot. And it's really hard to process somebody telling you you're an idiot. Like it does not feel good. But you got to let that stuff go. And you got to go, that's the wisdom of the world. That they don't understand. They don't know. They haven't, it has not been revealed to them, right? Like they don't understand the Lord. Maybe no one's been speaking to their hearts, or maybe they've been turning away from the Lord. I don't know. Maybe it's been revealed and they went, nope, no, that was stupid. So when they say those things, we have to let all that go. We're not supposed to fight back with wisdom of the world. We're not supposed to argue with these nonsensical things. We're supposed to let those things go because they do not have wisdom. You sit and understand the wisdom of the world is nonsensical. The wisdom of the Lord is the truth. And those are the things that we sit in. So I'm going to finish on that. It says, you belong to Christ and Christ belongs to God. So that's the end of this chapter. And I've been going really long because these are, I feel like, really important chapters. But if you have found this to be a blessing, if you stuck with me and you found this to be a blessing, I want you to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you guys next time.